Hey, it's Matt with Gomez Writes Games. I wanted to record an actual play of Charon's Obols to show how you might use the information in the trifold to generate cool ideas and create a shared narrative in the Greek underworld. For this playthrough, I'm going to be playing as Perseus, and if you take a look at the back of the trifold, it's got a map of the underworld as well as the playable characters, and we can see here that Perseus is courageous and selfless, but he has a hard time turning down challenges. His heroic ability is to reflect attacks using his weapon, which is Athena's reflective shield. And we also see here that he died by accidentally gazing at a gorgon. So if we turn the trifold over, you'll find the setup, gameplay, and divine intervention sections. The setup section shows how to roll for obol locations, but since we're playing solo for this actual play, we'll do things a little differently. The gameplay section describes how players meet as well as the core dice rolling mechanics. And lastly, the divine intervention section is there to kind of inspire ideas and offer cool things to introduce if your players need some motivation or the narrative starts to stagnate. I'm making this actual play more to show kind of what a session might look like and hopefully inspire you to feel more confident running a session. So I'll describe what happens as well as how I might use the oracles and roll results to kind of inspire the story. So the first thing that we're tasked with doing in the gameplay section is describing the meetup. It tells us that players arrive on the plains of Ash one by one, reliving the last moments of the heroic act that cost them their lives. So that's exactly where I'm going to dive in. So let's get started. Perseus creeps into a dilapidated palace in search of the dreaded gorgon that has been plaguing the nearby village. Already 3 souls have fallen victim to her gaze. Their stone statues frozen in horror along the path that leads to the crumbling walls the rogue gorgon calls home. As the hero who had slain Medusa, it was natural the village elders would seek his help ridding them of this threat. Perseus hefts his mirrored shield and keeps his gaze locked on the ground, fearful of raising his eyes beyond just a few feet ahead and locking eyes with the gorgon. Maybe it's because he'd slain Medusa and claimed her mirrored shield. Maybe it's the pride of youth. But the silence makes Perseus feel like the gorgon spotted his approach and fled, knowing she would meet her untimely end if she were to face Perseus head on. And so he risks a glance around the interior of the palace's foyer. Shattered pottery and torn tapestries litter the ground, but the palace appears empty. "Stop hiding and face your destiny, beast," Perseus calls out. It's then that he hears a soft hiss behind him. He raises his sword and spins, keeping his gaze low. But the gorgon must have been watching him, must have known he'd been staring at the ground. Because there she is, crouched low behind Perseus, looking straight up into his eyes. Perseus opens his mouth to scream, but as his chest heaves, his muscles, tendons, and flesh harden to stone. Only a soft rush of air sneaks past his lips, a pathetic whimper belying a hero's legacy. The palace darkens. The walls fade. Time slows. The ground beneath Perseus's feet crumbles into finer and finer dust until nothing but black ash remains. The scream he'd been summoning rushes out, and his sword comes crashing down, slamming into the ash-covered dirt. He trembles at his close call with death. How did he escape? Did the gods intervene? In his confusion, Perseus risks a glance around him, fearful he might truly catch the gorgon's gaze this time. Only, as he looks, he realizes he's no longer in the gorgon's palace. The sky is dark, and endless fields of ash spread out nearly as far as he can see. "The underworld," he whispers to himself. "I'm dead?" He does a slow turn to gain his bearings. In the far distance, he spots what looks like a tower. Beyond it lies a looming mountain range. Closer, however, he spots the banks of a dark river. Charon, he thinks, guardian of the river Styx. He'll carry me across to Elysium so I can meet my final rest. Perseus sets out across the barren landscape toward the river and follows it until he spots a decrepit wooden dock and a cloaked figure standing in a boat. And here's the first spot where we'll do a roll, because I'm sort of unsure how Charon's going to respond to Perseus approaching and asking for help. So in this case, I'm going to roll a 1d6 on the Oracle of the Unknown, and just take a look at the words that come up to see if anything inspires something. So in this case, I've rolled a 4, and looking at the words, brittle is one that kind of stands out to me. So I'll use that to inspire what happens next. Charon leans on his ferryman's pole as I approach, his body looking like it might fold to a stiff breeze. "Hello, Perseus," he says, his voice soft and rattling like a wind through the branches of a dead tree. "Charon," Perseus replies, "I've come to request your services to cross the river Styx, so I might take my place in Elysium." "So it seems, yet I see no obol in your grasp," Charon replies. "So, how do you expect to pay for your fare?" "Obol? I was turned to stone by a Gorgon, so I've not been given proper burial rites. Surely an exception can be made for a hero." "I'm afraid not." "I'm stuck here?" Perseus asks, turning to point at the fields of ash surrounding him. "An eternity in purgatory?" "It would seem so." "Surely there's another way." Perhaps. Many have arrived on the plains of ash. Many have been ferried across for judgment, but not all. There are some who are driven mad at the realization of an untimely end. There are some who flee the river in hopes they might discover a way back to the realm of the living. It is folly to think it possible, yet they try. Perhaps you can find one of those lost souls and claim the obol they've so foolishly ignored. Anger flares within Perseus. How dare Charon treat a hero like a beggar? How dare he send him off to scavenge for a piece of copper to pay for his fare across the Styx? Yet his anger fails to change his circumstances. "So be it, boatman," Perseus says. "But before I leave, the least you could do is offer me a place to start." So this is how, for a solo game, I'm going to kind of randomize where I go. In this case, I'll roll a 1d12, and we'll say on a 1 to 3, we'll head to the Asphodel Meadows. On a 4 to 6, we'll go to the Prison of the Titans. On a 7 to 9, we'll head to the Cave of Dreams. And then on a 10 to 12, we'll go to the Barren Isles. And in this case, I rolled a 2. So it looks like we're heading to Asphodel Meadows, which kind of makes sense anyway, because it's the first place on the map. Many lost souls who refuse to accept their deaths wander toward that copse of trees, Charon says. Perhaps you might convince one of them to part with their obol. It's not far off, Perseus says. So if what you say is true, I should be back shortly. Be sure to keep your ferryman's pole at the ready. Charon grunts in response, and though his face is hidden in the blackness beneath his hood, Perseus swears he sees the briefest flash of a smile. Perseus sets out at a brisk pace from Charon and his damned river. The copse of trees the boatman had pointed out looms in the distance. A faint trail in the ash, compacted by the footsteps of countless lost souls, leads the way. Here's another place for a roll, so I'm curious if Perseus encounters anything on his way to the meadows. So I'm going to roll a 1d6 on the Oracle of the Unknown and take a look at the yes-no column. Okay, so here we got a 3, which is no but. So we'll say that nothing eventful happens along the path, but maybe Perseus is going to begin to question his fate. As Perseus treads along the path, he rethinks his life. Had he made the most of it? Had his pride led to his downfall at the Gorgon's palace? He'd never been one to turn down a challenge. Surely the gods could sense his bravery. Surely he would be granted access to Elysium after finding an obol to pay Charon. Consumed by dark thoughts and self-doubt, Perseus makes his way toward the trees, and before long, the landscape begins to shift. Long, brittle grass juts from the ash-covered soil. The air is dank, humid, and permeated by the stench of urine. Pale, wilting flowers dot the landscape. Perseus pushes through the grass and nearly trips over a man laying on his side. "Apologies, I didn't see you there," Perseus says. The man's eyes open slowly, and Perseus watches the man's gaze roll up as he looks Perseus over, then drift back toward the ground before closing again. "Excuse me," Perseus says. The man doesn't respond. "Charon sent me this way. I'm looking for something. An obol." I'm curious whether the man is going to respond to Perseus or just kind of ignore him. So we'll roll on the Oracle of the Unknown and take a look at the words. Alright, so I got a 4, and that is aid. So it looks like the man will help Perseus after all. The man's eyes remain closed, but he lazily reaches his arm out, pointing to a massive dead oak looming nearby. "Many thanks," Perseus says. The closer Perseus draws to the oak, the more pungent the air becomes. People lay amidst beasts, their limbs tangled like the stalks of wilted flowers. Amidst a thick tangle of roots, a woman sits, reclining against the dead tree's trunk, golden hair flowing down her shoulders and blanketing the earth around her. She's not moved in so long, the tree's roots have grown over her limbs, trapping her in their grasp. Perseus strides up to her and awaits her greeting, but none comes. "Forgive me for intruding, but I have come in search of an obol," Perseus says. When she says nothing, he inches closer. "Charon sent me." So here's another good spot to roll because I'm unsure if this mysterious woman is going to respond to Perseus. Everybody in this area seems like they're just sort of languidly laying around, sort of completely unresponsive almost. So we'll roll on the yes-no column and see what happens. All right, so it's a 2, which means no. So just a flat-out no. Perseus draws nearer, but the woman doesn't seem to notice. "Please, I beg of you to help. My destiny awaits on the opposite shores of the river Styx, but I lack an obol to pay for passage across." Still, the woman doesn't respond or move. Perseus raises his mirrored shield and holds it in front of the woman. "Perhaps if you don't notice me, you will respond to a vision of yourself and the pathetic state you've fallen into." Okay, so here's our first chance to roll using the core mechanics. So just a refresher, we're going to roll 1d6. If we get a 5 or a 6, it'll be considered a strong hit, meaning Perseus gets exactly what he wants, there's no consequence. If we roll a 4 or a lower, it'll be a weak hit, meaning he succeeds, but there's some sort of unwanted consequence. And then if I choose to, I can roll an additional 1d6, and if I do so, I have to add it to my result. And then that result, if it's a 7 or higher, will be a miss, and something bad is going to happen. But if it's a 5 or 6 with that, it'll just continue as a strong hit. So it's a little bit risky, but let's roll the 1d6 and see what happens. All right, it's a 5, so it's a strong hit. So Perseus is going to get the exact reaction he was hoping for. The woman's eyes open, and she stares blankly at her reflection. Slowly, as if recognizing an old friend she's not seen in a long time, the woman's eyes widen until she stares back at herself in slack-jawed horror. "What have I become?" Her jaw trembles as she stares. "A waste. We're all waste. Waste in a wasteland. Endless ash for eternity." "It doesn't have to be that way," Perseus says. "You could cross Styx and face your final judgment." No, I can't do that," she says. "There's a way back to the realm of the living." "Don't delude yourself," Perseus says. "The past is behind us, and there's no changing that. Please, I need your aid. What is your name?" Her brow furrows, and she stares at the ground. A light gathers in her eyes, and she looks up. "Ergia," she says, as if she'd forgotten. "I'm Ergia." "Ergia," Perseus says. "I've come to seek your aid. I'm in need of an obol. Charon sent me your way in hopes that I may claim one forfeited by a lost soul." "It's hopeless." "I've only just begun my search," Perseus responds. "I've not yet given up like..." He sweeps his arm around, pointing to the souls littering the ground around the tree, frozen in place by their own despondency. "Just a matter of time," she replies. "You'll join us." "Never," Perseus says. "Tell me where I might find an obol. I'm willing to pay for it in any way I can." Alright, so here's another great chance to roll using the core mechanics. So I'm going to roll a 1d6 and try to convince Aergia to aid me in my quest for an obol. Alright, so we got a 3, which is a weak hit. And I'm not going to push it because I sort of like the idea of there being sort of an unwanted consequence here. So we'll say it's a partial hit, but there's something that I'm going to have to do in exchange for it. Aergia sighs. "I know of an obol." "Where?" Perseus asks. "Hidden," she says. "Tucked away for safekeeping, should I have once more felt the glimmer of hope you seem to carry so brightly." "I may have it?" Perseus asks. "If it is still where I hid it," she says. "And if you do as I say." "Anything." "Good," Aergia says. "Souls in this place are eternal. We can't die of old age, starvation, sloth, mortal wounds. I've tried. But it is rumored that there is one way we may end our suffering." "You want me to help you end your life?" "Life?" Aergia laughs. "No. I want you to help me end this eternal suffering. This existence is not life." Perseus kneels and lowers his head. "It is against my nature, but if it is the only way I can gain your aid." "Good," Aergia says. "It is said that the ash viper's venom is potent enough to poison a soul, living or not. Find one, bring it to me. End my suffering." "Do you have any idea where I might find such a creature?" Perseus asks. "In the brackish marshes at the edge of the meadow," Aergia says. "They slake their thirst on its fetid waters." "Then I shall capture one of these vipers and return to help you meet your end." "Take care," Aergia says. "Don't get bit." Perseus turns away from Aergia and makes his way to the marshes. Snakes, he thinks, the image of the Gorgon fresh in his mind. Why is it always damned snakes? And that'll be the end of this sample of actual play. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope it gave you a little bit of inspiration to try out the game on your own, whether it be solo or with a group of your friends. If you like the game, I'd love it if you'd leave a review and let me know how your play went. And if you like this actual play, let me know in the comments. It's something I would be definitely interested in continuing to pursue. So until next time, happy gaming.